I'll just
Exactly.
be
Then I
like
can just be
better
like, all
off.
right, lower those expectations. I was supposed to go on a salmon trip, and we kind of knew that the fish weren't in the water, and we were sort of expecting it to not be great. And our
Yeah.
like host wrote us a message a couple days before the trip to be like, you might want to bring your trout gear, which is sort of his way of saying like it's going to be tough. It's like your rookie quarterback's out for the season. You might want to bring your trout gear. This you're not catching any
Right.
salmon. You're not going to the playoffs.
Temper those
Yeah,
expectations.
exactly.
Welcome to Guys Fishing Weekly. We don't just fish, we hook.
What's up, buddy?
Eddie.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm cranking, baby. I'm loving life.
That's good, dude. I love it when you're loving life.
You gotta love it. That's what I'm learning. You gotta love it. You gotta bring the energy for it. You gotta embrace
Yep.
it.
Embrace it, because it's going to kick the shit out of you some days and just whatever.
Yep.
Just whatever.
That's what tomorrow is gonna do to me. I got a 18.6 mile run tomorrow.
Oofda. That's your biggest one, yeah?
That'll
Your
be my
longest
biggest
run?
one so far. yeah.
Okay.
So
Sweet.
14. I think a little over 14 is the longest I've done.
Are you going into 18.2 or whatever you're doing tomorrow? Are you going into this with expectations, or are you just going to go bomb it, see how it goes?
I'm gonna bomb it and see how it goes. I do know
Okay.
this, that if I
You have to do,
runs-
I imagine you have to do some management of like, pace, and you have to pay attention to that stuff. But
Yeah. You learn a lot about yourself as you do this over and over
Yeah.
and over again.
yeah.
There's definitely an urge to go fast out of the gate. And I'm getting much better at not allowing myself to go fast out of the gate.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing a lot more runs. This is going to bore people, but I've been doing a lot more runs of like in what they call zone 2 training,
Yeah.
where you really feel like you're running painfully slow just to keep your heart rate in a specific zone
Okay.
of your heart rate. And so it helps you build endurance for your heart to push longer. And so I feel like I'm almost like walking, even though I'm not. It's still like
Right.
6 or 7 minutes faster than my walking pace to run this slow.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm just like hopping up and down as I run around. But I can keep my heart rate down, which is awesome. And so that's what I've been working on. And I know that I can always kind of fall back on that in one way or another and start off that way and kind of keep moving, but slowly work into a faster pace. And so this run will take me like little over 3 hours probably. So, yeah, I just have
Wow.
to pace myself and
Nice.
start off slow
Okay.
and
Great.
yeah.
All right.
So
That's good stuff,
it's
dude.
gonna possibly kick the shit out of me tomorrow. So
Right.
we'll see.
Well, good luck with that, bro.
Thanks, Ben.
Good luck with that.
What are you celebrating?
I am celebrating the grand return of my son and my daughter, who both live somewhere else. So I think there's a good chance the 5 of us might be together this weekend.
Wow.
It might be a short period of time, but yeah, I'm going to get to see my son, who we haven't seen since we dropped him off of college, and my daughter's coming down from GJ. So
Are you
yeah,
gonna lay,
so I get
are
to
you gonna lay out like a smorgasbord of hams and cheeses as a celebration? Everybody gather around.
Yeah, I don't know what it's going to be. It's just going to be. We're just going to be together, which is enough for me. Yeah, I don't care. I let the missus handle all that stuff. Yeah, I just get to show up and be cool and have fun with them. So yeah, so it's good. Anytime I get those little tastes of us all being back together again, it's a good thing.
I look forward to
Yeah.
getting the update on to how your
Yeah.
son's initial month of college has been.
Yeah. Well, yeah. From noticing the times he's getting home in the evenings, I think he's having a good time. How about you, dude? What are you celebrating? I know it's not an 18-mile run tomorrow morning.
No. I am celebrating just what I've accomplished this year. Not so much out of the fact that I've accomplished a lot, but out of the fact of like, it kind of goes with what I'm navigating too. Probably should have gone backwards, but just the act of slowing down and appreciating what it is that I have done rather than what I haven't. Um, and so I don't have a list per se of things that I have done that I'm like, heck yeah, awesome. But just kind of a mid to 2/3 of the year done, uh, 2/3 of the year being done, looking back and being like, you have accomplished stuff. It hasn't been all for nothing. And so, just kind of patting myself on the back for the things that I have accomplished this year.
That's good, and I think that that's an important piece, because I think you said it, like, too often we look at what we haven't done, or we get stuck in that place where what we haven't completed. So I think that's great that you're actually changing that focus.
Yeah,
That's good
I think
stuff.
it's, I think it's, I think it's hard. You know, we do this recording roughly weekly, and to think of something that happened in the last week that you're celebrating, unless it's something big and dramatic, it's sometimes
Right.
hard to think up something. Whereas, looking back over a longer period of time, you're like, oh wow, I do have things I can celebrate that have happened this year, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the mundaneness of life, sometimes it's hard to find those near term celebrations. So
Right. Right. That's good.
yeah.
What about navigations?
Well, so the navigation aspect, I guess, is that slowing down. So I picked up the book that Eric Orem, I guess episode 25 mentioned, the relentless pursuit of busy or what. The title's a little confusing. Um, so
Right.
it's the ruthless elimination of hurry or something
Or
along those
something.
lines.
Yeah.
But it does. He was right. It's a book that does bring up a lot of. I mean, it speaks to you. I think it probably would speak to almost anybody who's in the American lifestyle, Western culture for sure, of just busy, 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 always doing something. A lack of, you feel a little bit of shame from making lack of progress on things, and so, but you're also always picking up new things to be busying yourself with, and so I'm just kind of actively trying to slow down a little bit from that and just be like, it's okay. You don't have to you don't have to do all of these things, and but it's hard. It's hard to not want to grind things out
Right.
and
Right. Right.
escape into the work or the project or the whatever and just actually sit around and kind of be a little bit. So that's kind of my navigation right now, I guess you could say.
Nice. It's a goodie. That's good,
Mhm.
dude. I think that's an important one.
It's toughy.
Yeah, yeah, it's not easy.
What about
That's
you?
for sure. Um, I'm navigating the way that I'm communicating with people. I'm trying to be more aware of how I maybe not come across. That's never been a big thing for me, but maybe a little bit more empathy in listening and in my communication, because so I think that there's, you're in a work cycle. When I was working in, I'm at work all day, it's stressful, I come home, I unwind. If I'm short with people, there's reason behind it, right? There was, I think, a little bit more understanding of if I'm, don't feel like communicating or whatever. Now I don't have that excuse anymore. Now I have, do you know what I mean? And so I've noticed that, there are times when I might, be short or snippy or whatever. And I'm like, well, why the hell am I doing that? Like there's really no reason to. And things happen. It's not like I don't have any stress in my life anymore. I do, but I don't know. I've been aware more, I think, and maybe it's the time that I have that I'm thinking about things differently. But certainly in my communication with, predominantly my family, because that's who I see the most. My youngest daughter and my wife, and so it's, just how I'm communicating with them, and trying to be a little bit kinder and better, I think, in that communication. Um, and yeah, so I'm navigating that, and it's not easy. You know what I mean? Like that's yeah. So, but yeah,
It definitely is harder when you don't have an excuse that you can hang your hat on and
right.
justify your shitty behavior. So
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So my daughter, she's got a crack bat. And she plays softball, and her bat. If anybody's dealt with softball, they know it happens. But she came out of the dugout after the game yesterday, and I was like, you need to get rid of that bat. That bat sucked. Like you need to borrow another bat to hit with. And she was just like, oh, good to see you too, Dad. And I was so wrapped up in like what, kind of like what you were saying, like what she didn't, what was wrong with, and her approaches to the play were great. And she did fine. It wasn't like she had a horrible game or anything. And it was just like, fuck, you could have done so much better. And I was just really kind of like, and she was like, rare, like kind of, which my daughter is never afraid to let us know exactly what she's thinking. But it made me think like, yeah, I probably could have done that in a lot kinder way and like not so,
Yeah.
so it was pretty funny. So yeah, that made me think about how I'm communicating with people. I'm like, you got some work to do, dude. You could be a little better. So yeah. So that's how it kind of came about, but it's funny. So anyway, that's what I'm navigating, dude.
that's a good interaction to learn from.
Yep. Trying to get better, trying to be better. So, who we got today, Ed, on the show?
Today, I'm excited for this one. We are talking with David Coggins.
Author David Coggins, fishing guru. He wouldn't admit that, but
He wouldn't say he's a guru. He would say he's an
Right.
enthusiastic amateur angler.
That's right. Yeah, good dude. If you've never read any of his stuff, we have read his books, and yeah, this is an exciting one.
His most recent one being the Believer. Prior to that was the Optimist, both great fishing books. And he's also written a lot of good stuff around men and manners. That's what his book title before that was Men and Manners, but just fashion, men, and all of that. So definitely check out him, his books, and he writes a newsletter called The Contender. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, absolutely. Collections of his little essays and stories and stuff, but a fascinating dude.
For sure. It was a great conversation. Really looking forward to it. We talk about things including learning the sport and the mentors that help guide you, intentional pursuit of adventure and friendships, fishing traditions, fishing alone versus fishing in groups, and the misfortunes of being a Minnesota Vikings fan.
A good one.
So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the show, Minnesota Vikings fan David Coggins.
Oh my God, you got me at a vulnerable moment. Hey guys, great to be here.
Good to have you on the show. And David, I can appeal to your sense of troubled football watching. My wife is from Minnesota, and so we are Viking fans.
Oh my God, my condolences.
Yes, shares the pain that is being a Minnesota Viking fan with you.
It's like all you do is fish for permit, and you've seen a bunch but never caught any. That would sort of be the Vikings to put it in perspective.
Hey, but you got a nice new stadium.
Nice stadium. No, I mean, I wasn't expecting to go down this route, but I try not to get too caught up in like the off season and drafts and stuff because I waste so much time like following these guys during the season. And then they have this like draft pick, they trade up, and now they're getting a quarterback, and like all these people are messaging me who like are crazy college football fans, like JJ McCarthy and all this. So now I'm kind of like a little bit getting excited, and then of course like before the season even starts, he's out for the year, and I'm just like, okay, just stop, just get it over with. It's sort of
give me the pain right up front.
Exactly. Then I can just be like, all right, lower those expectations. I was supposed to go on a salmon trip, and we kind of knew that the fish weren't in the water and we were sort of expecting it to not be great. And our like host wrote us a message a couple days before the trip to be like, you might want to bring your trout gear, which is sort of his way of saying like, it's going to be tough. It's like your rookie quarterback's out for the season. You might want to bring your trout gear. You're not catching any
Right.
salmon. You're not going to the playoffs.
Temper those
Yeah,
expectations.
exactly. That's the hardest thing
Yeah.
to do. I mean, we and yet we still fall for it every year.
Yep.
Every
Oh,
fishing
indeed,
trip.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in South Florida, so I'm like a dolphin fan.
Yeah.
I'm mired in mediocrity the same way. So I'm just like, oh, God. Right. Yeah.
It's
Used
fun.
to it.
When I was young, I was obsessed with Miami. First, I love this show, Miami Vice. I love the Miami Dolphins. I love Dan Marino. I love turquoise. I'd never
Right.
been there, just like those things, and
Yep.
a little bit grew out of that. But
Yeah, I'm a newly retired teacher, and so I taught for 25 years, and I had a Dan Marino shrine in the corner of my
Yeah.
room. I had my Dan Marino jersey hanging in the corner. So
number
yeah,
13,
so
baby. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, so I have since he left, we've struggled. So yeah, it's he's the bomb. It's good.
I guess we'll switch to the topic or some of the topics at hand.
Yeah.
Not talk football the whole show, although we could.
Yeah,
We could.
How did you originally get into fishing? I know you've written about some of it in your book, but it doesn't sound like your family was much of a angling group. So how did you get into fishing?
Yeah, my parents. I come from an angling agnostic family for sure. I grew up in Minneapolis, and our family has a cabin, still does. I was just there on a lake in Wisconsin, and so I fished there at first just the way like a kid fishes, like out of a Luma craft with for bass, very simply. And then I met two men, friends of my grandfather's, who were great anglers, great sportsmen, and they taught me to fish, and I kind of also a little bit learned on my own, very poorly fly fishing on the Housatonic River in Connecticut. But those guys, Carter and Dave, who I've written about, they took me on rivers in Wisconsin. We went for smallmouth. Great anglers, great guys to be with, kind of from a different era for sure. And I learned from them mostly by watching them. They were kind of quiet. They weren't demonstrative in the way they taught. I know you said you were a teacher, Reid, but this wasn't like they're telling you too much. You're kind of like watching them do something that they make look easy, and it took me years to just get remotely as good as they could. But it's all as I get older. I mean, those guys are both have moved on to the trout stream in the sky. But I appreciate so much like how crazy they were. Like they would like find rivers that looked like they would have trout, and then they would just like take a canoe down it, not even fish it, just to see if it looked good. I mean, these guys were crazy, and then they would go back and try it out and do crazy shuttles and pay people to drive their cars back. I mean, now I'm like, I really respect these guys who would never let me tell anyone where those rivers were or what they were. And I was like, this is a good ethic, and I appreciate those guys kind of more now, how they operated.
Right. Yeah. You write about Dave in the Optimist, and you talked about how he kind of mentored you, and you described him really well as kind of like the old timer guy, right? That like
Sure.
when he gave you kind of like a compliment, like, oh yeah, you're getting better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and yeah.
Sometimes you don't realize kind of well, I mean, it's embarrassing when you look back at how you start these things, but it's really a natural process, right? Like at first you think, we were casting poppers to the bank, right? And like
Right.
Dave would cast it an inch to the bank. And I was like, well, if mine is a foot from the bank, that's fine. But kind of it's not actually fine. I mean, often we're like, oh, what difference does it makes a difference, and then when I got better or, even just intermittently, it was like I'm some sort of virtuoso, but you did realize kind of what was at stake. And if he did say something nice and they were kind of reluctant, both those guys were reluctant to give out compliments, you do kind of seize onto that thing. And also you can just, when you watch someone who's really good, I think one thing that interests me the more I like fish with guys who really know what they're doing is like the range of their motion like is quite tightly controlled. they're just very good at it, and it doesn't look hard. I think when I was doing it, like I was making it look very hard, which is generally not a good sign. If you're like you don't need, like, anyone who's good at anything, like a sushi chef or a squash player, or I don't know, like their motions are generally quite controlled. And I really like watching, like when you hand a guide your rod, and you're like, do you want to try this? And they just like start doing the craziest, casts and whatever, but they're also often, their range of motion is quite small. I kind of admire that the more I'm on the water with these guys.
Absolutely. The simplicity of it
Yeah.
becomes, what I mean? Like, it just is like, it's admirable. It's I think you wrote something about, like, he was the kind of guy that didn't put a whole lot of time into fishing, but he got up at 5 o'clock in the morning anyway. You described me as kind of like that old timer. And it's like, I read that and I was just like, I think maybe I have moved into that old timer phase now. I think I'm that guy because I get up at 5 o'clock every morning and I'm just,
Well, and also I think when these guys, I started fishing with them, like they were just kind of needed another guy in the boat, really. I fished with them sort of separately, but they needed a second, oarsman or whatever. And it wasn't like we were, that emotionally connected, but over time, I do think, like if you fish with someone, I mean, you have different types of guys you fish with. Some people you see every year and you're catching up on everything and you kind of see the world in a similar way. Other people what you connect with is the fishing. And sometimes that's enough, and it's a great, and so you see these guys and they're not, I live in New York and Dave was sort of scandalized by New York and the traffic and the people and the this, and I'm like, we don't have to go into all that, Dave. We can just stick with the trout or where I fished since I saw you last or you fished, and that's nice. Sometimes that's, I think fishing can sustain a friendship.
Absolutely. Yeah, that kind of mentorship is so important. And I think, one thing that I found with Ed, I'm 20 years older than Ed, and Ed's father and I are very good friends, and that's kind of how we got into this. And we've been doing this fishing trip, our guys fishing weekend trip, for 28 plus years. And so it's, we found that kind of mentorship. And since Ed, he couldn't go on the trip until he turned 18. And so, that was the rule. And so once he turned, he came in. And so, but just to have that kind of mentorship, and it doesn't have to be always do this,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, just let it be and organically grow. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And we found that.
It's amazing sentiment. I totally agree. I think it surprises you, like, as I get older, then all of a sudden I'm the one arranging trips or teaching people or including them. And I'm like, oh, wait, how did this happen? Or I'm sending out the gear list for our, bone fishing trip, or like, this is what you need, or I'm, a little bit helping, and it sort of sneaks up on you that then all of a sudden you're the one teaching your friends and who are trying to get into the sport, and you're kind of like helping them with their cast, and you're like, oh wait, now I'm the one, this is the nod, and they finally catch a fish and you're like totally revved up and you're like, rod tip up,
Right. Yeah. That's so funny you
no
say
slack.
That. I just took a friend of mine and his wife are brand new to the sport. And he's newly sober, and so we have that in common. And so he's like, hey, let's go out. And so I met him out on the river, and it was pretty slow. And I was helping him. I taught him how to tie a knot because he was using his nail knot tool. I'm like, I got one that's so much easier, dude. Here, just do this, and showed him. Helped his wife cast, and he made this comment, and he goes, it was slow and we weren't catching any fish. And he goes, wow, I would have thought you would have caught more fish, and how old you are and how long you've been fishing. And it was just sort of like one of those moments where I'm like, Jesus Christ, should I be catching more fish? What was that?
So that's like, could you remove the dagger from my back? I think
right. And I don't think he meant it that way.
No, of course.
Really
no,
I
right.
was just like, oh God.
It's it is funny how I do think you go through this like kind of progression in your angling, career or arc, where you go through the kind of greedy phase and you're really trying to catch a lot of fish, or you're kind of dirtbagging it and you just like can't get off the water, or nothing would make you stop unless, beside some other like major commitment. And then you get into this other maybe phase where you want to fish with your friends or help them get into the sport, or even kind of, sometimes I feel like I'm trying to help people understand more, like maybe being out there on a slow day is fine. Like if I get my friends on the water and they haven't fished, often they're a little bit they're revved up about the cast, or they're kind of amped up because they don't want to make mistakes. And I'm like, listen, just we're starting the day, there's no mistake you can make that I haven't made like 1,000 times. Let's relax. I'm so happy to be with you on the water today. Let's have fun. It's this whole day. And whether we catch fish or not, like, don't put so much pressure on yourself. And I think fishing, sometimes we do focus so much on, the 5 minutes where we've got a fish on the line, and we forget the 5 hours we're there when that's not happening. And if we enjoy the rest of that time, then we're really, that to me is like the highest level of what's going on. And then you're either hopefully with friends, or you're in a place that you love and a beautiful place kind of outside of reception. And then you're really, that's good. And then you don't need to be catching the fish all the time.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. We always talk about how you got to lift your head up every now and then and just
right.
Look around. Right. And it's not so much about, just that fish on the line. I definitely agree with you though. There is that hero's arc of, just being a greedy fisherman at the beginning, and then it turns into something different, and then ultimately, the best thing is watching somebody else catch a fish and teaching somebody else and almost catching that fish together. And I kind of wonder if that's wonderful. What your buddies who brought you into the sport kind of were on that hero arc and got that joy out of it.
I think that's a really great point, and I think they did do that, and it took me a long time to realize it. Probably took me to enjoy seeing someone else do it to realize that they got pleasure when I did something right and it kind of succeeded. And I remember one time when I made a cast to the bank, and like I didn't really know what was going on. Like there was just this wake pushes out, and all of a sudden my popper's gone. I'm like, what's going on? But I mean, I set the hook just because out of kind of a reflex, and the next thing you know, the bass is in the air, and I'm like I literally could not speak. I'm fighting this fish, bring it in, beautiful smallmouth, and I turned around to Carter, and he's just smiling, and I was like, wait, did you know what was going to happen? He's like, yeah, of course, I saw the wake. I was like, why didn't you say something? He's like, I wanted you to do it, you to have your moment, you to engage, and also probably you to fuck it up if you do, but it was a nice, but I connected with him in that moment in some way, and he was not a demonstrative person. I mean, these are old guys who just didn't really show emotion like that. But I appreciated that. And I think he was happy for me.
Yeah. Genuinely.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you've obviously been on a ton of fishing trips. Yeah, I guess maybe let's start with an easy. Well, this probably isn't an easy question, but I guess what is your kind of favorite trip that you tend to go on?
Well, it's funny. I write a lot about like trips and faraway places. I mean, like, that's all fun and I love it. But I mean, I don't want to forget home water. Love it. Have it in your life. Follow the seasons and don't be picky about it, whether you're in North Carolina, Colorado, Kansas City, wherever it is. I mean, I fish the most anywhere in the Catskills, and I absolutely love it. And I love going back to a place and over the years and remembering what had happened there. And I really, home water is a beautiful thing. Okay, get that out of the way. Now, my favorite trips, I mean, I love Patagonia. And sometimes it's not just for the obvious reasons. Like, it isn't, like, I like to go to Patagonia because I like to go to I love Argentina. I like to go to Buenos Aires. I like to be there for a few days. I like the fact that I'm there in January or February when like New York is miserable. And then to fly down to Patagonia, I like the little airport in the city. I like the guides, my friends in San Martin, and that trip is very great for me. I like the way they fish. I like the kind of just charm of the hospitality there. And then as I've gone more and more, I see the same guides every year. And then I actually have more specific ways I prefer to fish. At first, I was just like floating on the big rivers. Now I prefer to kind of wade on the Majejo, which is another thing that changes as you get older, you find like the level of, like, to me, four good fish a day in relatively hard conditions, waiting is good for me. That's like, I like that equation. I don't need too many fish. I like each one to be sort of a challenge, but I like there to be I can't just have one, and if I blow a shot, that's it. That's too much pressure. So for me, like 4 is good, and the Majejo River is like really great for that. And so it's and you got to look, and it's mostly sight fishing, and that to me is special, and the whole thing together is really wonderful. And now I've got kind of a group of guys who also we go together, kind of like you're talking about, and then that makes it even kind of better. And that trip has kind of people of different experience levels. So some guys are very much like, we're going to wait and we want it to be harder. And other guys are just like happy to be there. And that's kind of nice too, because you get their enthusiasm if they're, even if they're on dry droppers and nice rainbows or whatever it is. And while other people are just very meticulously casting small dry flies to fish. And that, I mean, you can't beat it. That it's just a wonderful thing. Though close second, totally obsessed with bone fishing. I go to a very simple Spartan camp, and I love that. It's mostly waiting. And I think also coming from New York, where there are, lots of tall buildings and activity and just craziness, to go out to the flats with nothing, which is incredibly beautiful. The first time I went there, actually, first time I went to Andros, I was not prepared for the flats. I really I felt a peace there in a way I don't normally feel. And then the fishing was incidental. But then it turned out I love the fishing too. I love wading. I love bonefish. I love the whole stalking thing. And those two trips are pretty special for me. Then any variation of those would also work.
right. Or combination of those.
Right,
two,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. There's these moments when we fish alone and we fish by ourselves, and we take a day and we go out, and then there's moments when we share share fishing with others. You've experienced some of that too. Talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned a little bit about that. You go on a trip alone, and then sometimes you go with your buddies.
Yeah,
the difference between those things and what that brings you.
I think there's this. I think something about fishing, when you do it a lot, or you do it in a certain way, or if you spend a lot of time doing it, is this kind of self-containment in a beautiful place. And I think that's a really specific feeling, where you arrive at this point, and if you're fishing alone, you're making like a different part of your mind is activated because you're making all the decisions. I love fishing with guides. Guides are great. I have friends who are guides. I fish typically with the same guides who I love, and I'm very happy to have them make most of the decisions. But when you're on your own, you've got to be the author of everything that's happening, and that is great too. And I mean, the first time I went bone fishing, and I couldn't see the fish very well, and I knew I thought I would never catch a bonefish alone unless it was tailing. I was like, I'll never be able to see it. I can't do it. Or I would see him too late or whatever it was. And so when I finally did catch one on my own, it was a very nice feeling. Or the first time I caught an Atlantic salmon on my own was also shockingly great. I mean, this still happens to me. It's not like you outgrow it. And I think when you're alone, you have to kind of trust yourself, but you're also, I think, sensitive to a lot of things that are going on. I mean, if you're with a guide, there's nothing, I mean, that's wonderful, but you can also, it's sort of like your friend is driving a little bit, but maybe you're navigating. I don't know. So I think on the metaphor on that one, but I think when you're alone, you're sensitive to what's going on around you. And I think that's, we've always got our phones with us. It's even changed in, 20 years, like where I fish in the Catskills, thank God there's like no reception. Just to know that I could check my phone, even if it was off, would sort of change it slightly, if you know what I mean. And I think it's good to have us be in a moment like that. And I think anyone who fishes, no matter where it is, at some point, especially if they succeed, or even if they're struggling on their own, you feel a different kind of contentment and a connection to the natural world than we have any other time in our life.
Right. Yeah. It actually, like that whole phone thing, kind of sometimes will drive where I go, how far I go.
Oh my God, that's totally.
Yeah, I take a day off and I'm like, all right, I'm going fishing all day. Do I want text messages from my kids and my wife? No, I don't. So I'm going to go up where I know there's no service and check out. Right.
I remember years ago, I had a magazine story I was in West Yellowstone, and it was at a message from an editor, and I was like, And I knew it was like about edits at the end of the story. And I was like, there are two ways to do this. Like, I can either deal with it now or pretend I was in in the park, at the Madison in the park and where there's no reception. And I was like, I just have got to deal with this now, or I'm going to be thinking about it the whole time. I need to get it out of the way. And then I can like focus and be there as long as I want and not worry about anything. And sometimes you got to get your life in order a little bit just so you can then, get away from your responsibilities.
Definitely.
Yes, indeed. Funny, the Yellowstone, you mentioned that. And your experience with seeing the Yellowstone River, and you wrote about how it was kind of embarrassing because the flow of it seemed. Ed and I were just last month, we did an 8-day trip up to northern Wyoming and up at
sweet.
Yellowstone. And
Excellent.
neither one of us I hadn't been there in 30 years or whatever.
me
So
either.
it was kind of like our first time there. And when we drove down the Yellowstone from Yellowstone Lake the first time, and we're just like, wait a minute, what the fuck is going on? This river's flowing the wrong direction. Like,
That's
we had
embarrassing.
the exact same experience that you wrote about. I was like,
wait, a river
oh my
can
God,
flow
it's-
north? What's like, all right, continental divide. Right, good. I think they mentioned that in school. I don't know.
Yes, they did. Yeah. It's just hilarious.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are all these things that sometimes you just have to see them. I mean, in a weird way, it's even like you don't believe certain things you just won't understand until you see it or experience it in a way that's even like before I ever saw a bonefish, I was like, oh man, I was trying to watch videos or photos of them to see if I could see them. Like, obviously, like that's not going to help at all, but, or, just these miraculous, or it's like if a tarpon jumps or something, it's like, it's going to happen, or a salmon jumps, and then it's like, it's still a surprise, or you're like, whoa, that was wild, or just how strong a smallmouth bass is, or when a bonefish goes on a run. I was talking to a friend, and we're about to go on this bonefish trip, and he's never caught one, and I was like, I'm a writer. I kind of like describe things for a living, and I was like, there's still nothing I can say that is going to prepare you for a bonefish going on a run the first time. You're just like, what is happening? This is incredible. It's so visceral. It's like explaining to someone like champagne or why kids love, ice cream or something.
Wow. Yeah, we haven't done that yet, but that's definitely on the bucket list.
Yeah, it's you said you lived in Florida.
Yeah, I
before?
grew up there, but my dad didn't fish. I didn't hang out. I didn't fish until I came to Colorado to college. And so I came out to go to school here, and I never left. And so I've been here for 35 years, whatever. But and I'm a trout bum. Like little creeks, whatever. And so bass fishing, done some of that with the fly rod, not a ton, but some around here. But other than that, we haven't done a whole bunch of the big hunting, fish, but we're getting there. We're working towards it.
I mean, I think another thing, I think like the more you fish, like I think the small streams, I think sometimes it's easy to get distracted about like, okay, well, whatever, a 16-inch trout or a 20, like these numbers are not consistent for where they, like to me, a fish that's correct for its body of water is a good fish, Right. And so if you're in a place and you're like, oh my God, this 12-inch brook trout or whatever that's native here, like that's a wonderful thing. And I think this idea that just because we're talking about all these great destinations, like there is total dignity and wonder with a fish that belongs where it is, and it's not like if it's not a 20-inch trout it didn't count or something. I mean that's not how I look at it at all. And I think one thing that's a little bit confusing our sport with social media, it's just part of the world, and that's not going to change. But, there are these videos that make it seem like it's all action all the time, super trophy hunting, like, cast behind it's like a highlight reel.
Right.
But, it would be like, it's like a highlight reel of soccer where there's only 2 goals. And it's just like, you got to watch the whole game to see those 2 goals, but they're just showing you goal after goal. They're just showing you crazy fish after crazy fishing. Like, that's not really the sport, like it's part of it. And it even kind of loses it's such a high that you don't have the downside that is so important to make the high have more significance. And I feel like that can lead us astray a little bit or set up, I mean, you're talking about expectations, that a little bit can give us the wrong idea about the kind of where the adrenaline belongs. Because this isn't like, we're not like mountain climbing here. We're trying to do something that's a little more sedate, that then has these like moments of action and excitement, and the downtime is important. Like the two things work together, I believe.
Right. Yeah, and you've done this passionate thing that you have with fishing. Clearly, is a major part of your life, as is writing, right? You've made a career and a living in writing, and those two things take a lot of failure. There's a lot of failure that goes into those two
Sure.
things. And I'm not saying you're like,
No,
and
no, no.
you've been able to but that kind of failure and reflection seems to be a really, really important part of your development. It just comes out in your writing. You write about that stuff a lot. And clearly, if you're an angler this long, failure's a part of it. And kind of that idea of failure and reflection, you seem to have adopted that, and kind of like that's a big part of you believe in that.
Yeah, I mean, add Vikings fan to that, and then we got a lot more failure. Well, yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think I think fishing is something you do, and it's a thinking thing. You are, first of all, you're making decisions. I mean, I actually try to make fewer decisions. I like to fish with a smaller range of flies. I mean, I joke that everywhere I trout fish, no matter where it is, England, Patagonia, Catskills, the parachute Adams will work, and like
Yes.
and I have like
Listen, Ed, the parachute Adams, not
as
the
many
stimmy.
parachute Adams. You can't have too many, and you should probably really only have those, and maybe blueing olive or whatever. But I like to not make too many decisions, and yet at the same time, we're analyzing things a lot while we're and noticing things. I mean, to me, a writer is very much. I mean, there's different parts of it. You want to observe closely, and you want to express it, what you're seeing or what matters to you. And I think, fishing is a lot about observation. I think one thing writing about, and failure is a part of the sport. And I think I don't write as a technical genius. That's why Tom Rosenbauer exists. If you want to take your fishing to the next level, you read his books and many other people. If you want to, I don't know, to me, I try to put our sport into a context of kind of what the emotions are like for, I'm an enthusiastic amateur. I'm not like a high level expert, and I don't pretend to be. And I even think that by talking about my mistakes, which are many, and being open about them, I hope I can connect to people who, like this is a sport that's in many ways defined by its learning curve, and to act like there aren't steps along the way is sort of silly. It's like for people who are really good cooks, like of course you're going to burn something, or you're going to do it. You use the wrong measurements or whatever it was. I mean, that's all part of it. And I think to acknowledge that is important. And I even think to embrace a more complicated relationship with success is kind of part of, living in the world without getting carried away. But I like that. I like people who are open to a more complicated relationship with success and failure, and even the minor disappointments of life. That's like, it's not always smooth sailing. And I think fishing is funny because it is, in one sense, this wonderful escape from the regular part of our lives, and yet it can still break your heart too. And it's sort of like sports. I'm like, wait, why am I watching sports? It's making me very upset. My Vikings are losing. It's like, why did I come to Canada to try to catch this salmon? Or whatever it is. And I think that's why I'm also fascinated by fishing trips, because no matter what happens, by the end, you're like, put your little narrative on it. Oh, if I catch a fish in the last hour of the last day, then this trip was a success. Or the last fish you lose, even if the rest of it was great, then you remember that last one you lost. And I'm like, I almost look forward to that last thing, because then it makes you want to come back, or it kind of makes you humble in a way. If I ever feel like, well, now I've got it figured out, it's almost like I'm going to get struck by lightning 20 minutes later, because you guys are like, oh, I finally figured this bonefish out. And you're like, no, you haven't, record scratch or like, so right. I don't even, it's like this trout game, it's under control now, and then I'll like break a hook or catch the back of my hat or whatever with a cast. So it's right. You're in this balance. And even when and then you can also get saved in a way when you're like, oh, it's been a hard day, or maybe the fishing is tough, or why did we even come out? And we kind of knew it wasn't going to be good. And then you rescue the afternoon with a beautiful fish, and that one fish, I guess that's what I mean about like how it fits in with everything else that's going on. And like that fish had more significance because 6 hours in it before you were in a drought, and that it felt differently, and that's a wonderful thing. And I think that's what I try to write about, and the pleasures of being there. And then if there's some, other connection to life. Sometimes you can get carried away with that stuff, but that's why it's a book. You don't have to believe every last thing in it or take every leap of supposedly poetic leap.
Right. You'd make a great middle school teacher. We need more people to teach kids how to fail, because I think, you know what I mean? Like, they don't know how to fail or how to put failure
That's
into
interesting.
perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that was always the battle, for a lot. That was where a lot of my frustration grew. Like,
That's
letting
interesting.
kids know that it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
You didn't get it. It's your first time trying it. Like, relax. It's okay. And, so yeah, I love that. Your attitude towards it is just phenomenal.
It's funny when you're teaching people to fish, though, because you don't. I think there's this I wish the sport was simpler. I mean, that whole kind of tenkara, make it easy, and I understood that more when a friend of mine, I just handed her a tenkara rod, and she liked it more because she didn't want line management or just worried about everything. And she's like, this is a natural way to be outside without worrying about everything. And sometimes that is all you want. Not everything has to be like, okay, make this, cast, throw in an upstream mend, the feed out line, okay, and then when it's slow set because it's a light, people are like, give me a break. Like, wait, I thought we were just going to be out here having fun, and you're like, oh yeah, right, sorry, this is something that will be fun for you if you keep doing it for 15 years. It's like, wait, what are we doing here? I mean, I do it is it's like a wonderful, difficult thing, and I think certain people's temperaments are suited for that, and other people want a more direct connection to success. And I don't really judge those people, but those people fish with woolly buggers.
Yeah. we know how somebody who likes streamers over here. Yeah, you are. Yeah. Stimmy all the way, baby.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm fascinated. Like, if I fish with people I've really fished with a lot and know, and we do have our progressions, it's like, let's start with the parachute Adams or whatever, or hopper or whatever on top. Okay, maybe we'll put, it's been an hour and a half or whatever. We haven't seen anything on the surface. Okay, maybe we put a little nymph on there, and then it's like, okay, well, this is a deeper hole. Are we going to put the second nymph on here? And then my friend's like, I'm putting a yellow streamer through this hole. Enough of this. It's like, where do you draw? Like, someone, it's like 5 minutes is enough for them to put the next thing on, and sometimes you try it for 2 hours, or you gotta stick with it. And I'm definitely don't want to act like some purist. I do some completely gnarly nymph rigs that are not. I don't really want other people to know about.
Right.
It's the artful version of the sport,
Yeah. No, I went fishing with a young guy who was on our show, and he's a guide down on down south, and he's real technical stuff. And I was fishing with him, and he changed his flies probably 6 times in the first half hour we were fishing.
Interesting.
And I was like, he was just on it. He was in his guide mind and going hardcore. And so he finally ended up tying up because he was fishing. He started catching fish, and it was with 24s and 22s in this little thing in nymphing. And I'm like, I'm ripping streamers through. I'm trying everything else, but I can't tie on those kind of tiny flies. So he tied them on for me, and I started catching fish. So it was just really funny because I hadn't tied on a nymph rig like that. Like he had on, he put weights on and had it at the right depth, and he figured it out within the first hour of us fishing. And,
well, some of those technical guys, right? They're gonna work through all their progressions right away. Going to make more fly changes probably in that, like you said, in that first hour, and then they're going to dial it in, depth, size, and I admire that. And if I'm with a guy and he wants to go crazy, we'll let him do that. And sometimes you're like, I just don't want to move at this speed yet. I'm just like, I like watching my little, PMX float through there. I can see it. Seeing it is nice, and every time I'm paying attention, and then you're like, okay, then but that's like, I think that the sport, it's like cooking, or grilling, right? Like sometimes you just want to throw the thing on there, and sometimes you want to marinate it and be really careful, and like there's nothing wrong with the simplest thing you do, and if it's serving the purpose you want, right? And then if you're like, okay, well, we're here, we came all this way, and this is what, like, I remember I was with a friend who lives in Montana. We went to Depews, and I'm like, oh, Depews, Spring Creek, one of the great places to fish, and I've fished there, a number of times, and I was like, I figured whatever I thought it was that day, and he fishes there a lot. He has a season pass, really knows what's going on. And we were throwing because of his like expertise. And this is around Halloween. So it's the end of October. And we were throwing like black ants 6 inches from the bank. And I was like, in an overcast day. And I'm like, Matt, what are we doing? This is like impossible to see. And how did you even know to do this? And like, and if we were with, it was Matt, a guy named Matt, his friend is a girl, expert fisherman, and angler, and she caught, like, she was casting that much closer to the bank and was like catching fish. I was not as close, and I was not catching them, and I couldn't see a thing. And I'm like, how did we get that? Can I just have a hopper? And then, so I went around the bend, so I didn't see all the fish they caught. And I, just because I couldn't, sometimes I'm like, it's like, this craziest technical stuff, and sometimes you have to know when it's just not going to happen for you.
Right.
And if I can't see it at some point, I'm just like, this is not happening. But I also admired that it freaking worked.
You again.
Yeah, exactly.
Just throwing the towel, whatever. Yeah. We're in week 5. I get it. We're not going to do it.
But even that is like if it's usual, like if you go with a guide in most places, and I like try to talk to them first and say, like, I'm not, I'm really happy to be with you. And I understand, like, it's never your fault. I just don't want to fish with nymphs all day. And often guides want you to start with a nymph just to get your first fish. And it's like, I don't want to just catch the rainbow on the nymph. Let's try these other things. And then we can move. If we're getting destroyed at lunch, we'll try this other stuff because it's just more fun. Right. And sometimes, but other people think like catching 25 fish a day is fun. And I just, I don't quite need that.
Yeah, no, he had the energy of a guide, and I haven't had a whole lot of guides. So it was, and there was a point where I was just standing watching him fish, and we were just talking, and he's like, "Aren't you gonna fish?" And I'm like, "I'm good, dude. I'm just chilling, man."
That's like a college education, college course. Watching him for an hour. I mean, these guys who are like, like super expert Euro nymphers. Even if you don't end up Euro nymphing, just seeing them do that, you learn so much about. Drifts and depth and the size of those little zebra nymphs and stuff.
Yeah. So it was great. It was a great day, and I learned some stuff from him, but it was awesome. It was fun.
One of the things you've written about a lot in your books, and maybe not said so directly, but it always seems like the stories you write about are often about the people that you're with on these trips. And, we obviously are all about our annual trip that we do together and the relationships we've built over time through the sport. But talk a little bit about, what those fishing companions, whether they're guides, friends, people you plan trips with, like what they mean to you and the trip in general.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think fishing is like the annual trip is a really wonderful thing because no matter what, like I like a, tradition that you do, whether it's, you get together for whatever, Halloween and trick or treat with kids or whatever, you grill something on Labor Day weekend and if you're really lucky, you go on a fishing trip, right? And then you can, you remember what you did the previous year or, who's happier or whatever, where it's like a marker of time and your friendship together. And, you start to reflect, oh my God, we've been coming down here for 5 years and then it's 10 years. And and when we started, you were saying maybe you're only 18 and now you go through a different phase in your life and that you didn't have a podcast or people didn't have or whatever it was. Like it's a marker of your connection to the guides and the people you're with. I mean, I'm lucky that I have some great friends who are great anglers and like to travel. And so that I think there is a certain type of person you want to fish with that kind of shares your temperament, whatever that is. And so if you like to go, trout fish in a kind of, dry flies for trout, that's a good thing. And my friends are not particularly competitive when it comes to fishing. I mean, I know a lot of guys are, and that can be fun too. And you bust each other's chops, but I don't really need that. If I'm like, I have enough issues that I want to be happy for them, like if they succeed, that's great. And sometimes we'll do things differently and their tactics might be rewarded or mine might be. And I think that can be fun too. If you understand each other, I think that's a really nice thing. The way both as like your temperament and your personality, but also the way you like to fish. And I think it can be fun. Like someone's going to get more gear and someone's going to stick with his, like, I mean, my best guy I fish with the most, he's like uses these rods made in China that he got for $50. And I'm like, what are you doing with this? Like I don't even know this knockoff rod. It doesn't even have a brand on it. And of course, like he's 20 times better caster than I am. Like he doesn't need the fancy rod. And so he jokes about, like he finds a reel that belonged to his father. Like he won't buy tippet. Like it's crazy. I'm like, Markley is his name. I'm like, he's appeared in my books. I'm like, I'm pieing on tippet. He's like, I don't want to waste it. I'm like, what do you mean waste it? It's like the whole point is to have enough for we're fishing. You're like, what are you saving it for if you're not? So I'll like, okay, I said, I'm just gonna give you this. You didn't buy it. He's very, frugal about his like gear and why would you buy it? And I'm like, I'm just going to give you this tippet. It's my big present to you. And he's like, okay, I'll tie it on. We're like, no, that's fun, because you understand like his crazy way to be. And then, and it's even nice to get ready for the trip. And you're like, we got to get new whatever. And you're sending people stuff. Are you going to get a new saltwater line, which of course you don't need, but you do it anyway. Or you start buying flies like in bulk that again, you don't need, or that turn out to be the wrong color or something. And all that's like, I love that. Like looking forward to the trip is great. And, and then when you show up and then maybe you meet in the Nassau airport or whatever it is, and all that stuff is so fantastic. And then, the time you're with people on the water, and then kind of when you're off the water and you're having a drink or just reflecting on the day. And that's a wonderful thing. And I think that then you're in the kind of the highest level of like one of the pleasures of the sport, because you're sharing something you love with people you care about. And the more you do it over time, the kind of more meaning it has for you. And I think that's a great thing.
You mentioned tradition kind of at the beginning of this and doing an annual tradition. And you've also written about it a little bit, but just something we talk about a lot is this idea of intention around creating these spaces for one another to interact, together. And, creating that tradition of, we're going to go do this trip and it's our time together to go and be, with one another and experience something and make a memory, and just creating, being a friend. I think in another one of your books, Men and Manners, you talk about kind of liking people or admiring people who are good at maintaining friendships. And with that, it takes a lot of intention. I think that's just something that resonates a lot with us, and
yeah,
maybe if you could speak on just kind of the intention of setting up these trips and maintaining them.
Yeah, that's nicely put. I think, this stuff doesn't happen on its own. It doesn't. You got whatever, wives, girlfriends, families, jobs, complicated schedules that everyone has, and to navigate how their life works. So to leave that, or you need to a little bit of a rationality. And, that was all easier when you were in college or whatever. And you're like, we're driving to Montana. And I think that's how like a lot of these things started. And you're just like, nothing mattered. You'd stay in the worst motels, or don't even know where you're eating, or this, or you just like, and then you move on a little bit with your life. And of course I look back at doing that stuff wistfully, and now it takes a lot of planning, and you got like people have to, make sure they can go for their own domestic things. And that's like, those things are real. I mean, that's like what your life is. And it's not to diminish that or to be like, oh, the ball and chain. It's like, those are, people you love too, that you're leaving behind. And I think you say like, all right, this is what we're doing. Hopefully everyone can come. You try to be smart about it. And then you try to get some good grooves in the I'm obsessed with like, how can we get to this place in one day, or like that is just like, let's be realistic about what we can accomplish. And like, maybe when you were young, the trip was 7 days for it to matter. And now, okay, it's 4 days. This is just what we're doing. And we're not going to get revved up on the fact that the weather was better the 3 days we weren't there, because we you just got 4 days is better than 0 days. And we're not going to compare it to what it was. And I mean, we want to be just the right amount of greedy, not too greedy, but greedy enough that we're going on this trip. And you try to like, and then once you do it the first time, it gets a lot easier and people know what to expect and the fishing is good. And I think you also, I mean, I really believe expectations are a huge part of this thing. And when people if you're going to go to the bone fishing, there's going to be wind, or it's going to be tough, or you're going to make some mistakes the first time, and guess what, the 10th time too, and or you're going to Atlantic salmon fishing. This is crazy. What are we doing? And you want to, if you're arranging the trip, you want to make sure people. You don't want to be like you're going to catch the biggest fish of your life or any of that nonsense. And I don't like it when lodges do that. I think there's a lot of it's. A lot of photography that's a little deceptive, and I think you want to be like, you're there to be together, fish in a good place, and then hopefully it becomes something, and that's a great thing when it happens. And then I also think it's cool if like one person brings a specific thing, this guy brings a bottle of rum, or this guy brings a box of cigars, or this guy ties some flies, and you got this wonderful, everybody's bringing some, sharing something with the other people, and that can be that's fantastic, and then I don't want to say the fishing's incidental, because it's nice when it's great, but it all that just adds to it, and so it's this space to be together, and that's kind of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. You it seems that you're big on men getting what we can do to be better, right?
Sure.
In things, whether that's manners, whether that's getting together for fishing trips, and I think that that's really an important thing for us to think about and be intentional with. When we think about intention, is how can I continue to grow as a dad, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as all these things. And you seem to write to that quite a bit. Speak a little bit about that.
Well, I think you want to. I feel like that a lot of what we're talking about is you come to a point in your life, and you didn't realize you were you were more mature than you thought, or you're a man that has responsibilities, or now you make a donation to a charity or an environmental fund, or now you mentor. We were talking about someone like it didn't. Yeah. You're like, oh right, I'm the adult in the room, or something. When before we maybe identified ourselves as reacting against that, or we. You've got gray hair in your beard, or you've got other, responsibilities to your family, or whatever it is. And so I think when that happens, that's obviously part of life. Right. And then I think it's good to try to take it. I mean, it can also be startling, right? That this thing that Indeed. You associated with someone else, now you're doing it, and you're like, oh, right. And then I think, ideally, we feel maybe more sympathy to our father, who we maybe didn't understand as well when we were young as we did when we reached the age of 40 or something, and started to have responsibilities ourselves. And I think you want to try to do that all with, a certain amount of dignity and sensitivity to the people around you, and try to be, in the simplest way, a good person. But that doesn't mean like, it doesn't mean you lose. You can still do it in your own way. And I think we want to be, charitable to other people while still being who we are. And I think, I want to be with good people on the water, and I want to be with good people off the water. And I want to be, kind of generous when I'm fishing with people. And that's like, letting them have the better shots or whatever it is. And I also want to try to be that way off the water. And I don't always do it. Sometimes I write about it to like make myself do it, or I write about an ideal that I still struggle to meet myself. So I don't want to act like I've got the solution, but I do think it's good to talk about those things. Society moves fast, and there's a lot of reward for an easier way out, and a lot of self-serving behavior that is probably a conversation for another podcast. But I still think that it's good to take our time and, see things from other people's point of view. And that, I think, a person who's good on the water is going to be good in the rest of their life. And I think you can tell how someone is by the way they do certain things. And to my surprise, fishing is one of those things. And if I, like, you can kind of tell the way people are, and you want to hold yourself to a higher standard no matter where you are.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear you talk about that kind of stuff, because that's some of the stuff that we feel too when we're on our trip, right? There's times when I go and I need I need my guys to give me something, right? And then there's other times when somebody else needs me to give something. And so, there's times when we go on this 4-day trip where I'm going to be more of a taker this time because
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
struggling with this in my life,
Yeah, yeah.
and then there's times when I'm a total giver. And so we found a group of dudes that are in touch with that kind of stuff and can function that way to a point where last time out we had one of our guys was like, hey man, I need your help with this, and we were able, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and it was awesome. And I think that being able to create and find those spaces, that helps us strive for that. I'm just trying to be better in this
Sure.
aspect of my life or whatever. And I think that there's, men can struggle with that a little bit sometimes, not understanding how to get that or where to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that, or maybe not even knowing they need that, but it's good stuff.
Well, I think if you like, the trip is an interesting idea because it's this, um, it's kind of exists outside of the commitments we have when we're at home, and I think that it can be, hopefully it's like a good relief, and then when you come back, you're better to be more generous with what, like, I see those things existing. Hopefully, I don't want to say in harmony, but in some sort of symbiotic relationship. Like you can't, for me, it's like I live in New York and then I leave New York, and I need to be here for a lot of things, and I need to be away for things too. And the one has meaning from the other. And so the fishing trip has meaning because of the rest of your life. And if all you did was fish, you would lose, the equation is different for each person, but I think The Believer, my last book, was very much about trying to find what that right equation was. And I probably went too far to the fishing side, and then the domestic side of your life, that is a little shakier because you got to find your priorities and define them. And that's going to change over time too. And hopefully you get back and you end up in a good place.
Well, it goes
Right.
it goes back to what you said about like the fishing experience of catching that fish. You got to have the lulls of the day
Exactly.
to get
Exactly.
the high of the fish, and it
Yeah.
all kind of comes together to make the whole experience. So, no doubt. I think one other thing that you've seemed to live quite a adventurous, exciting, worthy of a story type of life. How we talk about men needing to play more, and be friends and just be kids again in a way. And you've seemingly done a lot of going out and playing in the world and experiencing the world with one another. And you talk about, just socializing with one another and bringing gifts to one another and all the things that we do as kids that we kind of lose as we get older. I guess what has kind of play as an adult meant in your life?
Well, that's interesting. I think it's, I feel like a lot of things that should be simple require more work as you get older. And I think friendship is one of them. And I think that it would have surprised me if someone said it when I was 20, but like that friendship takes work. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is like, there's like this line between busyness and like recreation, and I think it's hard for people, very hard for Americans, because it's like a hard-working culture. If Europeans take longer vacations, they feel like a different relationship to their job, and Americans were, don't need to go quite down there. But to me, you got to work to create a space for you to do these things you care about. And if you don't make the time for your trip with your friends, if you don't make the time to fish, it's not going to happen. And I do take that seriously. Like, to me, I don't want to live a life that is without, I like people who make that time for themselves, whether they're going to sail, whether they're going to do ceramic, whatever it is, cook or bake, or I don't know, have their garden. Like, the thing doesn't really matter, but you got to have that thing, and you should, like, it should matter to you, and you should make time for that. And I think it's kind of garbage logic to diminish someone's, hobby is not quite the word, but whatever that kind of passionate thing they have in their life, And I think like I like people who make that room in their life to do that. And if those people make that time for fishing, it's even better. And I like that too. And I think that it's good to have some irrational kind of obsessions. Like if someone's going to drive around to see the Grateful Dead, I don't own any Grateful Dead records, but I totally get that. Like I completely understand that. And I wouldn't say it's silly. I would say like it's fun. And if you go every year, it's either Dead and Co or whatever iteration it is now, and you've done it every year, like that's fantastic. And I totally get that. And I think we've got to make, I mean, I don't want to act like it's a crazy noble pursuit, but like, what else do we have here? I mean, one of the things, like, we got to like take time to do these things. And if you can do them with your friends, I think like etching that time out can really help. And I mean, actually the Dead concert is kind of a good, example because it kind of gives you a reason to do it. And if the other reason is because there's the mayfly hatch in England and you go every May, like, well, that is good too, and that's your thing for 4 days and you look forward to it and you gotta kind of commit to it. And then you're in the same way you're committing to these friendships and you were alluding to maybe your friend needed, or just how your trips operate, like these, knowing that trip can be there can also serve this other purpose. And, it's like you look forward to it. It's in the calendar. Maybe you like work super hard ahead of time so you can take that time off or whatever. And it serves as this kind of antidote to the rest of your life. And I think that's, I think it can serve a lot of purposes, even if the basic purpose is just for it to be a really great time with people you care about.
Right. Absolutely. Either, if it's not the Dead, maybe it's Tom Petty.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right about, I'm a huge Tom Petty fan.
Tom Petty.
You're right
talk about
that,
Florida. Yeah. I mean, the guy's legendary.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm a huge Tom Petty fan, so we share that. That's great. That was always my favorite concert out of Red Rocks. We have Red Rocks, which is like the greatest place in the world to play a concert. And Tom Petty always played out there. And so that was like my one concert I used to go to. And it was
fantastic.
Just awesome. Yep. Nothing beats it. So that was good stuff. So I had to throw the Tom Petty thing in.
No, for sure. I think I stopped.
I miss him.
Tom Petty. I think that I saw Tom Petty. Probably the second concert I saw was Tom Petty. The third concert I saw was Tom Petty. And then somehow late at night, once Tom Petty had like played the Super Bowl halftime show, and I was like, and it was great. And American Girl and all these people came running out on the field. It was fantastic. And then I was like, that night after the Super Bowl, maybe I'd had a few beers, and I like went to get tickets in New York, and it was so expensive. I was so furious. 2 weeks later, an envelope comes in the mail, and it's like a Tom Petty ticket, 6th row, but in Philadelphia. It was much cheaper. And I was like, wait, what have I done? I like at midnight ordered a ticket. So now I'm going alone. You're talking about fishing or with friends or whatever. Now I'm going alone to Philadelphia to have like a great seat with in the middle of all these couples. They're like, well, you took a picture of me and my wife. I'm like, yeah, we whatever. And I'm like, what am I doing alone? And this isn't like a standing room club where everyone's kind of just milling around. I'm like very clearly like alone. At that time, I was much younger, so I was like around a bunch of boomers. And I was like, oh man, my principles like mess with me again.
That's awesome.
But worth it for Petty.
But totally worth it. Totally worth it.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. How about we wrap it up with the GFW hot seat?
Okay. Remind me what that is. Is this going to ask me super hard questions?
Super hard questions in rapid fire succession.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's do it.
Welcome to the GFW hot seat, where the name of the game is to answer the questions. And the prizes are... Wait, who said we have prizes?
Excellent.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is one thing in your life you're currently celebrating?
Well, I'll have to say this. I'm obsessed with my rice cooker. My girlfriend got me a rice cooker, and I thought it was a very unromantic gift. I just come back from Japan, and like I'm so excited. This rice cooker has changed I love this thing so much. It's gonna, when I watch NFL Red Zone, I'm gonna be making Japanese hand rolls and drinking sake, and so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Sweet, crushing the rice cooker. Nice.
I highly recommend it because there's all these Japanese markets around where I live. So I'm getting this like very specific rice. Of course, I didn't know anything about it. And then, of course, once I learn, I'm like, oh, yes, this has to be polished within the last, month. And it's from this one area of Hokkaido. Or if this is the only type of rice, I refuse everything else. But didn't even know it existed 3 weeks ago.
I didn't know we had rice snobs in the world.
I thought there was just white rice and brown rice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
that's what Chipotle tells you.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's what they want you to think.
Right. That's great.
All right.
All right, David, give us one piece of content that you'd recommend. Could be a book, movie, show you're watching currently. One piece of content you'd recommend to our listeners.
I would recommend E.B. White's essays, one of America's great writers, but he wrote any of his books, E.B. White, essays or One Man's Meat, and he often wrote them from his farm in Maine, and so they're often seasonal, and they're wonderful. The writing is great, but it's about everything, like a lot of good writing, and a lot of them from the 60s and 70s. So they touched on life and modern life and the dissatisfactions with, he was mad when they put Vacation Land on the main license plate. He thought he shouldn't be an advertisement for the state. And he talks about the animals on his farm, and that's wonderful. And I think anyone can read, and it's also very easy to pick up and put down. E.B. White, it always feels correct. And it also feels very nice at this time of year, as kind of summer's over and we're moving into fall. One of the great American writers ever.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
This is going to be hard for you. You've written about a lot of them.
Okay.
What is one of your favorite fishing memories?
I think the first time I caught an Atlantic salmon, this is going to be more. So one of the mistakes I always make is I keep adding new. And I'm not adding any more fish. I'm done adding fish to my repertoire. I'm not. The only room I have is for Atlantic salmon, and this is like messed with me. I've had some like absolute disastrous trips, and I really really love that fish. I love the migration of the Atlantic salmon, the story behind that, and how I like going to those rivers. I like migrations in general. That's another thing that sort of changed as I get older. I like being in places where kind of animals are moving and have done for thousands and thousands, and in salmon's case, millions of years. And the first salmon I caught was in Scotland a few years ago, and that I really did want it too much, and it I was all in my like weird expectations and desire, and I lost one, of course, right before, and I thought it would never happen. And of course, once it does happen, it's both great and then you sort of want another one, so it doesn't solve the problems you think it does. So catching my first Atlantic salmon,
the fish hedonic treadmill.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. What's one piece of advice you wish someone had given your 20-year-old self?
Wow, I'm gonna keep this to fishing. Because I feel like we've already been pretty philosophical about this. I would, if I can give someone else, because a lot of people ask me the same thing, young guys, like I fished alone for trout a lot, and because I didn't want to pay a guide, and that was back when a guide was a few $100s. It's obviously more than that. If I could give someone advice, I would say like get with a friend and hire a guide for one day. I know like it's a commitment for sure, and like the sport can get expensive, but if you do that, I feel like you will learn like 2 years worth of information in a day. And I really don't believe everyone needs the fanciest new rods and reels or the nicest waders, even though like all that stuff can be fun and I obsess over it like everybody else. But if you can save up, or it's a birthday present, or you do something with your dad, and maybe I don't know, you guys go together or something, but to go out with a guide, I think you can really, really learn a lot. And that can, even though it's an investment, it pays off immensely immense, you know, if you're lucky enough to have friends who are brilliant and can teach you, great. Most people don't, but if you, to go with a guide, and you can wait, it's not like just, and tell the person, like, I want to get better at this, or I'm learning, or please teach me or help me with my cast or whatever, you know, mending, or, you know, all that sort of line management stuff. And that can really, like, and don't be afraid to communicate that. And I would, to piggyback on that, I would always talk to a guide very openly in the morning of any trip. What, you know, how can you, this is my first time on saltwater, or this is this, or I struggle with this. Like, it's better to be open and not be shut off. And if you're, I've never, ever, after decades of doing this, gone out with a guide and not learned something ever. There's not one day that I come off the water without learning something. And it's almost absurd not to. Like, these guys are the, like, true geniuses of the sport, and that if we can't learn from that, I don't know what's going on.
Right on. That's great.
What is your definition of community?
Ooh, that's good. It's funny. I have a newsletter, and I didn't think I would feel this connection to the audience of, you know, like, if you write a book, it's like out in the world, and you don't always, you know, it's out there and I'm in here, or it's over there and I'm over here. I don't know. But when I write this newsletter, you know, it's online, and then people respond right there. And I think because writing is a private thing, that when you feel connected to the people, you know, the audience, that is more satisfying than I thought. So I think, I mean, we've been talking so much about friendship, so I'm not going to say friends as my community, but I think to find like-minded people, I feel like the internet is made the world, like, we're connected to so many things that we can lose a sense of some sort of shared, you know, idea of values, or you know, things we care about. So I really like when the modern technology actually connects us. And I think this podcast is an example of that. You can connect to people that care about the things you do. And when that happens, I mean, since I've started to write about fishing and have been able to, like, talk to people about it and share that, or someone says, I know that feeling of losing a fish, or whatever it is, or I struggle the same way, or I even had mentors. Like, a lot of people tell me about their version of Dave and Carter, the guys who taught me in Wisconsin. And I think having a connection with both, like, professionally, like with an audience, but also with, you know, readers and other people who like to fish, that's been a wonderful, wonderful community. I don't know if that's a definition exactly, but that's something that I'm happy about, and it kind of makes it worthwhile. You know, if you don't want to connect with people, then, you know, just write it in the journal and don't put it out in the world.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good stuff in there. Give us one thing you've changed your mind about lately.
Wow.
It can't be rice.
No, not besides the rice cooker. No, my beloved. I feel like when I'm going to talk about fishing. I mean, we've been talking about values and all sorts of stuff, but I think fishing, like, I really want to. And this is another thing. Is like I really try to take the pressure off when I get to a place, and I really want kind of my friends to succeed first, and I don't try to catch, like, I try to be way more patient about getting on the water, and not be greedy about, like, I'm finally here, let's do this. And I had a habit of like, we're here, I'm like, want to be a maniac about this, and da. We've only got this amount of time, and, you know, I've been looking forward to this, and now I'm like, I think if I take time when I get somewhere and I ease into it instead of, like, diving in. So if I'm in a drift boat, like, my friends will always be in the front first, and then I can, like, I just get into it more slowly. And I think when I do that, I, like, notice more things, and I try to, like, sometimes I just need to slow down. And so I think I was often so excited to be on new water, or to even just be back on the water, whatever it is, that now I've tried to, like, not, just, it's not change our expectations, but be be a little more patient when I'm out there and not keep. I was more attuned to what I thought success would be or should be or what makes something worthwhile. And I think if I make a more conscious effort to slow down, then I don't get as caught up in the numbers game or all that other stuff. And that for me, honestly, takes a lot of effort. I think it's hard to break out of the expectations game, and it takes a lot of effort for me to do that, honestly.
The hero's arc of the fisherman.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. You got it's there whether you want it to be there or not, you know.
Yeah. Indeed.
So our last segment is the conversation between guests, and so we have a question from our prior episode guest who was Tom Rosenbauer from Orvis Fly Fishing.
I know Tom.
Yeah. He mentioned that he knows you as well. We broke tradition and told him who the next guest was. So
nice.
He wanted to say hello and
sweet.
And hopes you guys can go
fishing
fishing together.
I love this interview conversation, and that's and I'll just say this about Tom is like Tom taught me in his own specific way, like not to walk up to the water so aggressively. I mean, he wrote about that, and everybody says that, like, don't walk up to a stream and you scare the fish, like really observe.
Yeah.
And I could not help but do that. Like where I go, like I want to look. Ed. I want to look at what's going on. And I can't tell you how many fish I've spooked from the back of a pool. Like I'll walk up and see there are obvious places where a trout should be holding further up. And so I'm sensitive to that. Then I'll walk up, and at the tail end of the pool, very large trout will move. And I'm like, what is going on? And Tom is like, he says I sit down and watch it for 5 minutes, and he advises that. And I'm like, okay, I can't do that. Like it's too hard. But so I really try, or at least I say, like, where will I be furious if a trout that I spook, where will that be? So I try to be further beyond that. And if it's in 6 inches of water, what are you going to do? You can't do that. But so Tom is still teaching me lessons a decade later from the last time I probably was fishing with him, maybe 5 years ago.
That's awesome.
All right. So what's his question? Sorry.
His question to you, and after we told him who we were interviewing, he said, you're not going to know the answer to this. But,
okay, good.
What is the
He's
next?
Gonna ask it anyway.
We're gonna ask anyway. What is the next big thing in fishing?
Ooh, God, I definitely don't know. It's funny. I think I wonder if there's going to be this connection to like a more analog way of doing it. Like if people are going to say they're going to take fewer photos, or they're going to have like a digital free experience maybe. And so that's not a technical issue in the sense of like what's going to happen with rods or tenkara or Euro nymphing. But if there's going to be some movement to a less documented way of being, like I don't really take fish photos. That can be complicated. Sometimes I'm with, obviously someone catch their first trout, they want a picture, or, sometimes you're a guest somewhere, they want you a picture with your thing. And I try not to do that. And it's not a judgment against people who do. It's a complicated thing. I much prefer the release video. I think it's better for fish. Fish looks often bigger. It's super cool if you want to play that game. But I think there might be a movement, like Atlantic Salmon Journal won't publish a photo in their magazine of its salmon out of the water. And incidentally, you're talking about things I changed my mind about, like the cover of the Optimist. It's like a very old photo. It's like a vintage photo of a fish out of the water. And that was clearly like a photo taken 60 years ago. I love that photo, and I think it's a great cover, but I may not have done that the same way now, even though it's an archival photo. But I think a movement maybe away from like the hero shot. We talked about the hero's arc. There's the hero shot. And I think it's like, everyone deserves their great fish photo, and then like let's move on and not it. I think even though it's a kind of mostly harmless thing, I think it a little bit plays into this. There's like this, it's like a currency of the fish photos, and the lodge needs to have it on their Instagram, and then you got to do this, and you're a hotshot guide or you're an influencer. It's like I think we want to move away from that. I think Tom probably would agree. I don't know if that's going to be a trend, but I hope it does become one.
I think
Right on.
I think that's interesting that you bring that up because it sort of aligns with something we've talked with other people about with what's going on in the industry of especially around like fly lodges and getting more people into the sport, and just kind of the concern that people have of there's no one coming there anymore, and everybody's kind of about getting that big fish and showing it on there, but not
Yeah.
really enjoying the experience as much. And so,
Yeah. I feel like if I, and I go to a lot of lodges, I know people who run them, and I like write about it and think, and, care about the future of our sport. And I think well, let me put it this way. When I was, the way I found my beloved Bonefish Lodge was on like Yellow Dog Angling's website, and there's like have this Bahamas section, and there is one that said like is a Spartan accommodations for the budget-minded bonefish obsessive. And I was like, here you go. Like, and they were very clear, and they're like, Spartan accommodation. Okay, great. No problem. Don't really care. Budget-minded. Yeah, why not? And just that they said that communicated so much to me. And then like there were no photos of it. And I was like, okay, like instead of like trying to make it look nicer than it was, and so much like there's a lot of competition. It's so hard to run a lodge. I really admire people who do it, and it takes a lot of so many different skills. But I think when you're honest about what people can expect, if I was going to give people advice who are trying to decide where to finally go somewhere, like a website should really give you a sense of what to expect at different times of the year, what the fishing is going to be like. You get all the way down to Patagonia and you want to use your dry fly fishing. If it turns out you're there and all they're using are sinking lines with streamers, and that's the only way to catch your trophy brown trout. Like, you want really clear communication and a clear understanding. And even with yourself, like, what do you want to get out of this trip? If you want to catch a 24-inch brown trout, it's better to be clear about that yourself. Tell how can I do this? And also be prepared for, if that's your definition of a success, be prepared for what might happen if that doesn't, if you don't catch that fish. But it's the open communication. I'm really for it. I think it makes everything better. And if a lodge says like, yeah, you come here to catch brook trout, not the biggest ones, but nice ones, and we get them pretty steadily at this time of year on dry flies. Oh, great. Okay, good. Now I know. And I think you want to be open about that. And when I invite people on trips, I try to help them. I was like, we're going to have some days that are good, some days that are tough, or this is what a good fish is. You're not catching a 10-pound bonefish at this place. Like, it's not happening. But it's like really good weighting. Whatever it is. And so I really, the more you're honest about what you want, and their guides and the lodge is honest about what's realistic, I think everyone's kind of understanding aligns. So that's my last philosophy of the day, unless you've got another blazing question about
That's it.
No more philosophy.
That's it.
Our last question is, you get to take it wherever you want to go. What's your next question for our next guest?
Oh, I got one for your next guest. I would say, like, how does conservation affect their places they fish a lot, and how they decide where to fish? Conservation meaning like the evolution of like kind of climate change. How is that impacting where they are and where they're going?
Okay.
Cool.
And I think that's you're talking about going to places again and again. Like, these places are changing and evolving, and if to act like that, I feel we've got to, you guys have a podcast and people who write about this thing and care about the sport. Like, you got to be taking care of these places and have a responsibility to do it. And if the people who love it and use it don't do that, who's going to do it?
Right.
You said no more philosophy.
Oh wait, dang, sorry.
No,
I'm gonna go set up my rice cooker now, and then it's just, that's a pure equations. That's just there's nothing more than
just measuring cups.
Exactly.
That's right. Yep.
No,
Good stuff.
This is an awesome conversation.
It was great to talk to you guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and I enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely. We'd love to get out there and go fishing with you in the Catskills sometime.
Goes without saying.
Right?
Or
Yeah. We'd
or
love to connect and do that.
or down to your bonefish paradise.
Yeah. Spartan
Yeah.
accommodations.
Spartan. Hey, we're all about Spartan
That's
accommodations
what we are. Yep. That's at the root of what Guys Fishing Weekend was all about.
for sure.
Yep.
So
Yep. So
awesome. Well, I'm sure everybody knows how to find you, but just to remind people, why don't you just give us a little pitch?
Yeah, I'm out there on the internet. My newsletter is called The Contender. It's on Substack. I write about travel and fishing and all sorts of stuff, design, and a little bit of philosophizing. And then my two fishing books, The Believer and The Optimist, they're out there in the world, and that's enough. I mean, you can always message me on Instagram, and if it's a fishing question, I'll respond. If it's anything else, I probably won't. But I appreciate it, guys. It was great to be with you, and hope to see you on the water.
Yes, you as well.
absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks, David.
Cheers.
David might be one of the most genuine fishermen out there.
Honest to God, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. When you think about authenticity, yeah, that dude's there.
He took it in stride, me busting his balls a little bit about the Minnesota Vikings right off the bat. He just didn't know it was coming, and he just rolled with the punches, man. It was awesome.
I think when you become a Minnesota Viking fan, it kind of just happens. You just have to, because otherwise it's going to be a real painful time.
A long existence.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I think what's admirable and what I look at, and I'm just like, wow, his travel, like what the trips he's done and the places he's gone and continues to dedicate time to, I think is really awesome. That's where I would love to get. Like when I think about, looking at people in terms of mentorship, like his approach to stuff, and I think it's real similar to mine in terms of, as you get older and you grow, and he kind of talked a little bit about that in terms of like the fisherman's arc, right? Yeah. And I think we're definitely in some places, but man, he has done some trips that definitely I aspire to do. And even in the ways that, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that, like, he says, yeah, I've been in some nice lodges and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day too, it's nice to kind of go the cheaper. I don't need all that. And so that seems to go a lot with what I value and how I roll too. So I think that was really cool to kind of hear him talk a little bit about that stuff.
For sure. I really appreciated his focus on the intention of making it happen. I think that for me is something that I too battle with. He seems to have figured it out a little bit, but just the actual setting of time to go do those things and making it, purposefully making it happen. He might not agree necessarily about, that's not true. He obviously goes and plays and does these things and is, very much, excited about doing these things and creating space to be, for lack of a better term, a kid again. I think is just so important, and setting up those spaces and times and places in life where it might be uncomfortable to take time away from family, and work, the other things in life that come up, the other responsibilities, to actually make that happen and live life beyond just showing up for a paycheck. I think that's really, really admirable, in the place that I want to aspire to be, even more so than just going on the trips, setting up time to experience those things or just experience other people.
Right. Yeah. And I think that there's, when you think about experts about things, I feel like what he has to say about that stuff, like he made a mention about like the difference in culture and the relationships we have here with our work versus, in Europe. And he knows that because he's gone over there and he's experienced those things, right? Through his fishing trips and the things that he loves and his passions, he's able to go over there and experience something else different from what, we can get wrapped up in. and then he uses those things in his own life, right? And he's shaped and formed his time in that way, like you're saying, like that commitment to doing trips and things, and he's intentional about those things. And I think he's learned that through experiencing other cultures and that kind of stuff from the trips he takes. And so I just think that's amazing. Those are the kinds of things that, I dream about, doing those kinds of trips as a fisherman, as an angler, but more importantly, as a human being, and learning about other cultures and places and being open to those things, when he talks about, getting a guide and listening to a guide and communicating with a guide about, being honest with your skills and what you want and what you can do and what you can't do. Those kinds of communicative things, you're going to get way more value out of those things. And he knows that from experience. So that's cool to listen to him talk about that.
For sure.
A down to earth guy I'd love to go fishing with.
Yeah. I could have talked to David for another few hours for sure. Easily. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like he kind of only scratched the surface on the things that he knows, and look forward to getting on the water with him one of these days, and maybe bringing him on the show again later down the road. So
that'd be awesome,
dude.
Yep. Great episode, man.
Yep. Looking forward to the next one, but this was a greatie.
That was a goodie. Yeah, for sure, dude.
All right.
Love you, man.
Love you, man.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening. Make sure to visit our website, guysfishingweekend.com, to check out the GFW merch, sign up for our newsletter, and learn how to get involved with the community. We appreciate you spending even a little bit of your week with us, and are glad to have you along on the journey. Stay legendary and happy fishing.